Michael Torres thought he was rescuing 4 desperate Filipino sisters from poverty. But what started as a lonely man's attempt at kindness had transformed into something the world couldn't understand. A family built on impossible circumstances that would either destroy him or prove that love doesn't always look like what society expects. The phone buzzed at 3 in the morning, cutting through the desert silence like a knife. Michael jerked awake in his empty Phoenix apartment, wondering who could be calling at this hour. The glowing screen showed a message from halfway around the world that would change everything. "My name is Isabella. Please help us. Our mama is dying." Michael rubbed his tired eyes and stared at the words. He had been scrolling through dating apps for months, getting nothing but fake profiles and women who wanted his money. But this message felt different, real, desperate. The photo showed 4 young women standing outside a tiny concrete house. Their clothes were old but clean. Their smiles looked forced, like they were trying to be brave. Behind them, laundry hung on rusty wires and chickens pecked at the dirt. "We are sisters from Philippines," the message continued. "Isabella, Sofia, Camila, and Valentina. Mama needs medicine but costs too much. We work hard but not enough money. Can you help us come to America? We will be good wives." Michael's hands shook as he read the words again. Good wives? What did that even mean? He looked around his apartment. Empty pizza boxes, unpaid bills scattered on the table, divorce papers still sitting in the drawer after 2 years. His own kids hadn't called him in months. He typed back, "How old are you?" The response came quickly. Isabella 25, Valentina 27, Camila 22, Sofia 19. "We speak English good. We work in factory but pay very small. Mama has cancer. Doctor says maybe 2 months without treatment." Michael walked to his kitchen and made coffee with shaking hands. Outside, Phoenix was still dark, but his mind was racing. These weren't just random women looking for easy money. These were daughters watching their mother die. Over the next week, the messages kept coming. Isabella sent photos of their mother in a hospital bed, tubes in her arms. The bills were in Filipino, but Michael could read the numbers. The treatment cost more than these girls made in a year. "Why me?" he finally asked. "You only one who answer," Isabella wrote back. "We message many American men. You only one who ask about mama first." That hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. He remembered his own mother's death 5 years ago. The bills, the helplessness, the way the doctors looked at you differently when your insurance wasn't good enough. But marriage? To 4 sisters? It sounded crazy, impossible, maybe even illegal. "I don't know if I can marry all of you," he typed. "We understand," Isabella responded. "Maybe just one for visa. Then we work, send money home for mama and sisters." Michael stared at that message for an hour. Just one. But what about the other 3? What happened to them? He called in sick to work the next day and spent hours researching Filipino marriage laws, visa requirements, and international money transfers. The more he learned, the more impossible it seemed. But the more impossible it seemed, the more he wanted to try. That night, Isabella sent a video message. All 4 sisters sat around their mother's hospital bed. The woman looked so thin, so tired. But when she smiled at the camera, Michael saw where her daughters got their strength. "This is Mama," Isabella said in the video. "Mama, this is Michael from America. He might help us." The sick woman raised her hand and waved. "Thank you," she whispered in English. "God bless you." Michael watched that video 20 times. Each time he noticed something new. The way Sofia held her mother's hand. How Camila adjusted the pillow behind her head. The way Valentina translated quietly when their mother spoke in Filipino. The way Isabella looked directly at the camera, not begging, but hoping. He made a decision that would change everything. "I'm coming to meet you," he typed. "All of you." The response came back immediately. "Really? You come here. I'm booking a flight tomorrow." For the first time in months, Michael felt something other than loneliness. Fear, yes. Confusion, definitely. But also something else. Purpose, maybe. Or just the chance to do something that mattered. He spent the night packing a suitcase and emptying his savings account. $23,000. Everything he had left after the divorce. Enough for plane tickets and maybe a few months of medical bills. As the sun rose over Phoenix, Michael Torres prepared to fly across the world to meet 4 women who might become his family. He had no idea what he was doing. But for the first time in years, he was doing something. The heat hit Michael like opening an oven door. Manila's airport was chaos, thousands of people, dozens of languages, and the smell of sweat mixed with diesel fuel and fried food. He clutched his phone, trying to spot 4 women he'd only seen in photos. Then he heard his name. Michael! Over here! Isabella stood near the exit, holding a piece of cardboard with his name written in red marker. She was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 5 feet tall, with long black hair and nervous eyes. Behind her stood 3 other women who looked just like her but different somehow. "You really came," Isabella said when he reached them. Her English was better than her messages had suggested. "We thought maybe you would change your mind on the airplane." Michael looked at all 4 sisters. In person, they seemed even younger than their photos. Sophia, the 19-year-old, barely looked old enough to be out of high school. Valentina, the oldest, had tired eyes that made her seem much older than 27. "How's your mother?" he asked. The sisters exchanged glances. Camila spoke up. "Mama is waiting. She wanted to meet you before." She didn't finish the sentence. They piled into a jeepney, a colorful bus that looked like it was held together with prayers and duct tape. Michael's knees hit his chin as they bounced through streets filled with motorcycles, cars, and people walking everywhere. The poverty was overwhelming. Kids played in streets that looked like rivers during rain season. Families lived in houses made of metal sheets and hope. "First time in Philippines?" Valentina asked. "First time anywhere except Mexico," Michael admitted. "I don't travel much." "Why you come now?" Sophia asked. Her English wasn't as good as her sister's, but her eyes were bright and curious. Michael looked out the window at a world completely different from Arizona. "Because you asked for help. And I know what it's like to watch someone you love get sick when you can't afford to save them." The hospital was a concrete building with broken windows and fans that barely moved the thick air. Isabella led him through hallways packed with families sleeping on the floor next to patients who couldn't afford private rooms. Their mother, Esperanza, lay in a bed shared with another woman. She was awake but weak, her skin gray and her breathing shallow. When she saw Michael, her face lit up with a smile that made him understand why these 4 women were willing to marry a stranger to save her. "You are the American," she said in careful English. "My daughters tell me you are a good man." Michael sat beside her bed. "I hope so, ma'am. I'm going to try to help." "You don't have to marry all of them," Esperanza said, her voice barely a whisper. "Just help them get to America. They can work. They are smart girls." "Mama, don't worry about that now," Isabella said, but her mother shook her head. "I am dying," Esperanza said matter-of-factly. "But my daughters have whole lives ahead. They deserve better than this." Over the next 3 days, Michael learned more about the sisters than he'd learned about his ex-wife in 10 years of marriage. Isabella had a college degree but worked in a factory for $2 a day. Valentina had been supporting the family since she was 15. Camila dreamed of opening a small restaurant. Sophia wanted to be a teacher but couldn't afford school. They took turns staying with their mother while the others worked or slept. Michael paid for a private room and better medicine. He watched the doctors' attitudes change when American money appeared. Suddenly, there were more treatment options. More hope, but the bills kept coming. The treatment was working, but slowly. The sisters would need visas, plane tickets, and money to start over in America. Michael's savings were disappearing fast. "Maybe I should just marry Isabella," he said one evening as they sat outside the hospital. "She can get a visa, work in America, and send money back." "What about us?" Sophia asked. Her English was getting better every day. "What happens to us?" Michael looked at these 4 women who had become the most important part of his life in just 1 week. The thought of leaving 3 of them behind made his stomach hurt. "I don't know," he admitted. That night, Valentina approached him alone. "Michael, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "In America, what happens if man marries more than one woman?" Michael felt his heart start racing. "It's illegal, called polygamy. People go to jail for it." Valentina nodded slowly. "But what if women agree? What if everyone is happy?" "Still illegal," Michael said. "But people do lots of illegal things that don't hurt anyone. Like speeding." Michael laughed despite himself. "Like speeding." The next morning, Isabella found him drinking coffee outside the hospital. "We talked all night," she said. "All four of us. We have idea." "What kind of idea?" "We marry you one at a time. Every few months. You bring us to America one by one. By time government figures out we all have papers. Maybe babies too." Michael stared at her. That's a really big crime, Isabella. If we get caught." "If we don't try," she said quietly. "Sofia will marry Rodrigo next month. He hits his first wife. Camila will work in club where men pay her to dance with no clothes. Valentina will keep working factory until her hands don't work anymore. And I will teach school for pennies until I get too old to stand." She looked directly at him. "You don't have to save us, Michael. But if you want to try, we want to try with you." Michael looked back at the hospital where a woman who felt like a mother to him now was fighting for her life. He thought about his empty apartment in Phoenix, his kids who never called, his ex-wife who said he was worthless. Maybe he was worthless. But maybe these four women saw something in him that he'd never seen in himself. "Okay," he said. "Let's try." The crying started at 5 in the morning and didn't stop until noon. Michael stumbled through his Phoenix house, trying to figure out which baby needed what while four women spoke rapid Filipino and American neighbors peeked through their curtains with disgusted faces. "Diapers!" Isabella shouted from the kitchen where she was making breakfast for 8 people. "We need more diapers." Michael's life had become a circus, and he was the guy getting shot out of a cannon every single day. 3 babies in 18 months, all his, all beautiful, all loud. Isabella's son Miguel looked just like her but had Michael's stubborn chin. Sofia's daughter Maria had her mother's sweet smile but cried like a fire truck. Camila's boy Roberto was quiet but watched everything with smart eyes that missed nothing. The house that used to echo with loneliness now exploded with noise, laughter, arguments, and the constant sound of washing machines. The sisters had created their own system. Isabella handled money like a bank president. Sofia took care of all the kids like a professional mom. Camila cooked and cleaned like she was running a restaurant, and Valentina, now 8 months pregnant, translated between English and Filipino when fights broke out. "Michael, the neighbor lady is staring again," Camila whispered, pointing toward the window where Mrs. Henderson stood in her yard, clearly listening to their conversations. "Let her stare," Michael said, bouncing Roberto on his knee. "We're not doing anything wrong." But that wasn't exactly true, and everyone knew it. Michael had married Isabella first, legally. Then Sofia 6 months later in a small ceremony that looked real but wasn't official. Camila's wedding happened at the courthouse with fake papers that cost Michael $5,000. Valentina's marriage certificate came from a friend who worked at the records office and needed money for his kid's surgery. For wives. 3 babies. 1 very confused construction worker who worked 16 hours a day to pay for everything. The money was becoming a huge problem. Michael's construction job paid decent wages, but not enough for a family of 8. Baby formula, diapers, doctor visits, car seats, clothes that kids grew out of every 3 months, the bills never stopped coming. "We could get jobs," Sofia suggested one evening while feeding Maria. "I could clean houses. Isabella could work in office." "With what papers?" Michael asked. "If immigration catches you working illegally, then we figure something else out," Valentina said, rubbing her huge belly. "We always figure something out." But Michael was scared. Not of the work or the money problems. He was scared of losing them. These women had become his real family in a way his first marriage never was. When he came home tired and covered in construction dust, Isabella had dinner ready. When he worried about money, Camila would rub his shoulders and tell him everything would work out. When he felt like a failure as a father, Sophia would show him how Miguel was learning to walk or how Maria was starting to say, Papa. The neighbors weren't hiding their disapproval anymore. Someone had called the police twice, claiming there was suspicious activity at Michael's house. The cops found nothing illegal, just a big family living in a regular house. But the looks on their faces said everything. They thought Michael was running some kind of weird cult. Maybe we should move, Isabella suggested after the second police visit. Find somewhere people mind their own business. With what money? Michael laughed, but it wasn't funny. We can barely afford this place. That's when Valentina went into labor 3 weeks early. Michael had been at work when Camila called, screaming into the phone in Filipino and English mixed together. Hospital. Now. Baby coming. He drove 90 miles per hour through Phoenix traffic, his heart pounding like a drum. When he reached the hospital, he found all 3 sisters in the waiting room, taking turns holding the other babies while doctors worked on Valentina. Is she okay? Michael asked, completely out of breath. Baby is too small, Sophia said, tears streaming down her face. Doctors say maybe problems with breathing. Michael sank into a plastic chair and put his head in his hands. The stress was killing them all. The money problems, the neighbors, the constant fear of getting caught. It was too much. Mr. Torres? A doctor in green scrubs approached them. Your wife is asking for you. Michael looked up. Which one? The doctor's face showed confusion, then understanding, then judgment. The one giving birth. Valentina looked tiny in the big hospital bed, but she was smiling. Michael, meet your daughter. The baby was so small she fit in Michael's palm. Tubes helped her breathe, and machines beeped around her incubator. But her eyes were open, and when Michael touched her tiny hand, she grabbed his finger with a grip that felt like a promise. She's beautiful, he whispered. What should we call her? Hope, Valentina said. Because that's what you gave us. But Hope was expensive. The baby needed special care that cost thousands of dollars every day. Michael's insurance covered some of it, but not enough. The bills started piling up faster than ever. We need to tell someone, Isabella said one night after they'd counted the bills 3 times. Maybe get help from government. If we tell the government anything, they'll figure out about the marriages, Michael said. Then what? They deport you and take the kids. The sisters exchanged looks. They'd been having conversations in Filipino that Michael couldn't understand. Private meetings when he was at work. Phone calls that stopped when he entered the room. What aren't you telling me? He asked. Sophia spoke first. We've been talking to other Filipino families. There's a lawyer who helps people like us. People like us? Immigrants who marry Americans, but situation is complicated, Camila explained. Michael felt his stomach drop. You mean other people doing what we're doing? Not exactly, Isabella said carefully. But close enough. He says maybe we can fix the papers. Make everything legal. How much? Michael asked, though he already knew he couldn't afford it. $15,000, Valentina said quietly. Michael laughed, but it sounded more like crying. I don't have $15,000. I don't have $1,500. That night, while the babies slept and the sisters whispered in their bedroom, Michael sat on his back porch and wondered if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd wanted to save 4 women, but maybe he was drowning them all instead. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We know what you're doing. Stop it or we'll stop it for you. Michael stared at the message, his hands shaking. Someone was watching them. Someone knew their secret. And that someone was about to destroy everything they'd built. The knock on the door came at 6 in the morning, sharp and demanding. Michael was feeding Roberto while Isabella made coffee and Sophia changed Maria's diaper. The sound cut through their morning routine like a knife through paper. Immigration officers. Open the door. Michael's blood turned to ice. Through the window, he could see 3 men in suits and a woman with a clipboard. Behind them stood someone he recognized, his ex-wife Linda, wearing a smile that could freeze hell. Get the kids, he whispered to the sisters. Take them to the back bedroom. Now. But it was too late. The officers were already walking around the house, peering through windows. One of them spoke into a radio while Linda pointed at different parts of the house like she was giving a tour to buyers. Michael opened the front door before they could break it down. "Can I help you?" "Agent Rodriguez, Immigration and Customs Enforcement," the lead officer said, showing his badge. "We have reports of marriage fraud and possible human trafficking at this address." Trafficking? Michael felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "What are you talking about?" Linda stepped forward, her face bright with victory. "Don't act innocent, Michael. For foreign women, for babies, all living with one man who couldn't keep his own American family together. You think nobody would notice?" Agent Rodriguez looked at his clipboard. "Sir, our records show you've been married 4 times in the past 2 years, all to women from the Philippines. Is that correct?" Michael's mouth went dry. I need a lawyer." "You'll need more than that," Linda laughed. "Show them the photos, Agent Rodriguez." The officer pulled out a manila folder full of pictures. Michael recognized his own house, his own backyard. Someone had been watching them for months. Photos of the sisters hanging laundry. Photos of him playing with the kids. Photos of all of them together at the grocery store. "These were taken by a concerned citizen," Agent Rodriguez said, glancing at Linda. "Someone who believes American laws are being broken." Isabella appeared in the doorway behind Michael, holding baby Hope. "What's happening?" she asked, though her face already knew the answer. "Ma'am, are you married to this man?" Agent Rodriguez asked. Isabella looked at Michael, then at Linda, then back at the officer. "Yes. And you?" He pointed at Sophia, who was peeking around the corner with Maria in her arms. "Yes," Sophia whispered. "All 4 of you? Married to the same man." Camila came out carrying Roberto and Miguel. "We can explain." "I'm sure you can," Agent Rodriguez said. "But you'll be explaining it to a federal judge. Sir, you're under arrest for marriage fraud, immigration violations, and conspiracy to commit human trafficking." "Trafficking?" Michael shouted as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "These women aren't victims. Look at them. Do they look like prisoners?" Linda's laugh was sharp and mean. "They look like foreigners taking advantage of a stupid American man. But don't worry, Michael. They'll be back in the Philippines by next month." "No," Sophia cried out. "Please. Our babies are American citizens. Born to illegal immigrants," Linda said with satisfaction. "The kids can stay if they want, in foster care." Michael watched his family fall apart in front of his eyes. The sisters were crying, the babies were screaming, and neighbors had come out of their houses to watch the show. Mrs. Henderson stood in her yard with her phone out, recording everything. "Wait," Agent Rodriguez said, looking more carefully at the children. "These babies were born here? All of them?" Isabella said through her tears. "They are Americans." The officer talked quietly into his radio while Linda's face got red with anger. "That doesn't matter. The marriages are fake. Send them back. The children are U.S. citizens," Agent Rodriguez said slowly. "That complicates things." "How does it complicate anything?" Linda demanded. "Arrest them all." But Michael could see doubt in the officer's eyes now. The situation wasn't as simple as Linda had made it sound. For women with American children, a man who was clearly working hard to support them all, a house full of family photos and baby toys. "Ma'am," Agent Rodriguez said to Isabella, "did this man force you to marry him?" "No," Isabella said firmly. "He saved us." "From what?" Isabella looked at her sisters, then at Michael being loaded into a police car, then back at the officer. "From dying poor and alone in Philippines. He gave us chance at life." "In exchange for what?" Agent Rodriguez pressed. "For trying to be good family," Sophia answered. "For taking care of him like he takes care of us." Linda stepped between them and the officer. "Don't listen to them. They're trained to say this stuff. It's all fake." "Mrs." Agent Rodriguez looked at his notes. "Mrs. Patterson, I need you to step back. Let me do my job." "I am letting you do your job. I gave you everything you need. Photos, addresses, proof of the fake marriages. And we appreciate that, the officer said carefully. But we still need to investigate properly. As Michael was driven away in the police car, he could see his 4 wives holding their 4 children, standing in front of the house that had been their whole world. Isabella was talking rapidly to Agent Rodriguez while Valentina leaned against the doorframe, still weak from giving birth. Sofia bounced Maria to keep her from crying while Camila held both boys. They looked like what they were, a family in crisis. At the police station, Michael sat in a gray room with gray walls and gray chairs, waiting for a lawyer he couldn't afford. Through the small window, he could see protesters already gathering outside. Some held signs saying, "Deport the criminals." Others said, "Keep families together." His story had hit the local news faster than a wildfire. Phoenix man arrested for marrying 4 Filipino sisters. The reporters made it sound dirty and wrong, like he was some kind of monster who collected women like trophies. But sitting in that gray room, Michael knew the truth. He'd found 4 women who needed help, and they'd found a man who needed purpose. Together, they'd built something that wasn't perfect but was real. The question now was whether a federal judge would see it the same way, or whether Linda would finally get her revenge by destroying the only good thing Michael had ever created. The morning sun filtered through the courthouse windows like golden honey, casting long shadows across the marble floor where Michael Torres sat with his hands folded in his lap. 6 months had passed since that terrible dawn when his world shattered into handcuffs and headlines. 6 months of jail cells and lawyer meetings and sleepless nights wondering if he would ever hold his children again. But something had changed inside him during those dark months. The desperate man who once scrolled dating apps at 3 in the morning no longer existed. In his place sat someone quieter, steadier. A man who had learned the difference between being needed and being valued. The courtroom filled slowly. Isabella entered first, wearing a simple blue dress that Michael had bought her for their first wedding. Behind her came Sofia, carrying Maria, who had grown so much that Michael barely recognized his own daughter. Camila followed with the boys, Roberto and Miguel walking now on unsteady legs that reminded Michael of his own uncertain steps into fatherhood. Valentina brought up the rear, baby Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. They took their seats in the front row, for women who had crossed an ocean to save their mother and ended up saving a broken man instead. Their eyes met his across the courtroom, not with desperation anymore, but with something deeper, trust maybe, or simply love that had been tested and proven real. The prosecutor was a thin woman with sharp eyes who spoke about Michael like he was a predator. "Marriage fraud," she said, her voice echoing off the high ceiling. "Immigration violations, a pattern of exploitation that threatens the very foundation of American family values." But when Isabella took the witness stand, the courtroom grew quiet in a different way. She spoke slowly, choosing each English word with care, her accent turning simple statements into something that sounded like poetry. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady despite the cameras and crowds. "Before Michael, I was teacher in Philippines, $50 every month. I taught children whose families could not buy them books. I taught them to dream of America while I knew I would never see it myself." She paused, looking directly at the judge, an older black woman whose face revealed nothing. "My sister Sophia, she was going to marry a man who beat his first wife, because her family needed money for food. My sister Camila, she was working in a place where men paid her to dance without clothes because factory job was not enough to keep us alive. My sister Valentina, she was sick with diabetes and we could not buy insulin." The prosecutor tried to interrupt, but Judge Morrison raised her hand for silence. "Michael did not save us from being poor," Isabella continued. "Poor is not shameful. Michael saved us from having no choices. When we asked for help, he was the only person in whole world who said yes. Not yes to taking advantage. Yes to trying." The courtroom was so quiet that Michael could hear his own heartbeat. Isabella's words painted a picture that no one in that room had expected. Not of victims and predator, but of desperate people finding each other in the darkness. When Sophia testified, her English was stronger than it had been 6 months ago. She told the judge about learning to be a mother while learning to be an American, about nights when Michael walked the floor with crying babies so she could sleep, about the way he taught her to drive and helped her practice English and never once made her feel stupid for not knowing things. "He did not marry us for sex," Sophia said, her young face serious and determined. "He married us because we asked him to help us live. And when we offered to love him back, not perfect love but real love, he was brave enough to accept it." Camila spoke about money, showing the judge bank records and receipts that proved every dollar Michael earned went to supporting their family. Valentina talked about citizenship classes and English lessons and the college fund Michael had started for each child, even when he could barely afford groceries. But it was Michael's own testimony that changed everything. He stood at the witness stand and looked out at the packed courtroom. Supporters and protesters, reporters and curious neighbors, his ex-wife Linda sitting in the back with her arms crossed and her face twisted with disappointment that her revenge wasn't working out as planned. "Your Honor," Michael said, his voice surprisingly calm, "I came here thinking I was rescuing for women, but the truth is, they rescued me." He told the judge about his empty apartment and his silent phone and his children who had stopped calling because their father had become a stranger even to himself. He talked about loneliness so deep it felt like drowning, about waking up every morning with no reason to get out of bed. "These women didn't need me to save them," he said, looking at Isabella, who smiled through her tears. "They needed someone to see that they were worth saving. And I needed someone to show me that I was worth something too." The judge asked hard questions about the legal marriages versus the ceremonial ones, about immigration law and marriage fraud statutes, about whether genuine affection could exist within such complicated circumstances. Michael answered honestly. Yes, he had broken laws. Yes, the marriages were unconventional. Yes, he had tried to work around a system that seemed designed to keep families apart. "But Your Honor," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word, "every single day for 2 years, I have woken up in a house full of people who chose to build a life with me, not because they had to, not because I forced them, but because somehow, in all this chaos, we became a family." When the judge called for recess, Michael sat with his lawyers while Isabella and her sisters huddled together, whispering in Tagalog and taking turns holding the children. Protesters outside grew louder, their chants about moral decay and family values filtering through the thick windows. But inside the courtroom, something had shifted. The prosecutor's case, built on assumptions about exploitation and fraud, had cracked against the simple reality of what Michael and the sisters had actually built together. Judge Morrison returned after an hour that felt like a decade. The courtroom held its breath as she shuffled through papers and adjusted her glasses. "This case," she began, "forces us to examine the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of justice. Marriage fraud requires intent to deceive for the purpose of obtaining immigration benefits through false pretenses." Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. "What I see here," the judge continued, "is 4 legal marriages between consenting adults who chose to create an unconventional but functioning family structure. Mr. Torres did not hide his relationships or attempt to deceive immigration authorities. The marriages, while numerous and unusual, were conducted in good faith between people who genuinely chose to build a life together." The courtroom erupted. Linda stood up, shouting about the destruction of American values. Supporters cheered. Reporters rushed for the doors to file their stories. But Michael heard only the judge's final words. "The court finds no evidence of fraud, coercion, or exploitation. The charges are dismissed." Outside the courthouse, protesters still waved their signs and shouted their slogans. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward a sky that seemed impossibly blue after months of gray jail cells and fluorescent-lit conference rooms. Isabella took Michael's hand as they walked through the crowd, Sophia and Camila flanking them with the children, while Valentina pushed baby Hope in her stroller. They looked like what they had always been, a family walking home together. "So what now?" Elena asked as they reached their car, borrowed from their lawyer because theirs had been impounded during the arrest. Michael looked back at the courthouse where a judge had decided that love doesn't always look like what society expects. He thought about the empty apartment he used to live in, about nights spent scrolling through dating apps and wondering why no one wanted him. "Now we go home," he said, lifting Miguel into his car seat while Roberto climbed in beside him. We go home and live our lives. Together. As they drove through Phoenix toward the house that had become their sanctuary, Michael realized that he had finally learned the most important lesson of his 53 years. His worth had never been determined by his ex-wife's anger or society's approval, or even these four women's need for him. His worth came from his own choices, from saying yes when others said no, from showing up when showing up was hard, from loving imperfectly but genuinely, even when the whole world called him crazy for it. The house on Maple Street still had bullet holes in the mailbox from angry neighbors and graffiti on the fence from people who thought they knew what went on inside. But as they pulled into the driveway, Michael saw it differently now, not as a hiding place, but as home. Love, he had learned, isn't about being understood by everyone. It's about understanding yourself well enough to recognize it when it finds you, brave enough to fight for it when others try to destroy it, and wise enough to know that sometimes the most radical act is simply choosing to be kind.